Welcome all. Thanks for being here. I hope everyone's had a smooth start to the year. So, my name's Jon Friskics, and I'm here today to talk about the year ahead, specifically what we're seeing at Pluralsight in workforce development and in tech more broadly. And I'm going to actually frame these things as tensions that we're seeing at the start of the year. So, every year at Pluralsight, we survey thousands of our expert authors and our customers, who many of them are also practitioners, about the tech trends that they see in their environments. We ask about skills, hiring, AI adoption, and how teams are actually getting the work done day to day. And that all comes together in our annual tech forecast report. And you can actually download that entire report using the QR code here. That'll be shared after this call as well. So AI is everywhere in the report this year, and that's probably not a surprising thing for me to say. We're in a real transformative moment. And the general vibe is that AI tools and workflows are being adopted across many different tech roles. In Pluralsight's AI skills report from earlier this year, we heard about AI use from software developers, cybersecurity and cloud professionals, customer service, and data workers. On the other hand, though, we also heard that while many are attempting to add AI tools to their operations, we're also seeing results that mirror some other industry research that suggests that not all of those AI projects are always resulting in measurable business outcomes, at least not yet. MIT, for example, has research from the first half of 2025 that states that successful AI adoption was only achieved between 5 and 40% of the time. So rather than try to cover all the findings from Pluralsight's tech forecast on this call, I want to focus on just three themes today: opportunity and skill atrophy, upskilling, and fluency. So, first, how AI is affecting opportunity. Now, AI tools can't yet replace all tasks that humans are performing, and it's not clear if they'll eventually be able to ever do that. But in general, tasks that are more objective and require following known, well documented steps tend to be more achievable with support from generative AI and less time consuming for humans to confirm the work that AI produces. Here's the thing though, those are also often the kinds of tasks that historically have been so important for entry level roles to engage with and practice so that they build those skills and confidence to begin with. And in tension with that, there's this challenge of AI related skill atrophy. This is when you have more seasoned professionals that have already built up a set of valuable skills, but they see those skills softened because of over reliance on generative AI tools. Anthropic, who controls one of the leading frontier AI labs and LLMs that they call Claude, recently released a paper titled How AI Impacts Skill Formation. And one of their findings, and I'm quoting here, was that AI use impairs conceptual understanding, code reading, and debugging abilities without delivering significant efficiency gains on average. Participants who fully delegated coding tasks showed some productivity improvements, but at the cost of learning the library. Now, this is obviously in the context of their carefully designed study and the large language model that they used in the test. But I think it's directionally true. There's often a trade off where work outcomes are achieved faster than before, but at the cost of those skills not being reinforced enough such that they're retained across multiple projects. So you've got these two forces. First, AI is making it harder for novice tech workers to get their foot in the door and have the kinds of experience and mentoring that they have historically needed to level up in their careers. And at the same time, it's also getting harder for experienced tech workers to maintain the skills they already have. Or if I say it even more plainly, it's harder now to get in. Once you're here, there's more effort that's required to stay. And that leads into my second theme that I'm going to cover today: the interplay between internal upskilling and burnout. Now, there's a few factors with some tension here, too. First, there's pressure on organizations to keep the people they have. This is because it's expensive to find and train new people. In addition to the money costs, there's extra time costs that show up as slowed down project timelines and general loss of team productivity as new people are onboarded or moved around and start to learn new systems. At the same time, though, there's an expected productivity gain from AI usage. And that means employees are expected to upskill on those tools while keeping the day to day of the business moving. And that tension between upskilling and staying the course results in a risk of burnout. A recent Harvard Business Review article about progress research noted that we discovered AI tools didn't reduce work, they intensified it. Employees worked at a faster pace and suggested that workload creep could lead to fatigue, burnout, and weakened decision making. So even before generative AI, this was an issue, but lately it's even more accelerated, and the upskilling cycles seems to be sped up even more than before. When the skills that you're learning are changing sometimes monthly instead of every few years, it adds a lot of stress. There's also extra pressure that senior employees face to educate leaders and decision makers in their organizations. And that means they not only need to be practitioners, they also need to have enough time with these tools to be able to speak confidently about them and to make predictions about the future. And that takes time. But like I mentioned before, things are changing so fast that there's real world limitations on how fast that learning can be expected to happen. In our 2025 survey, we also found that the top barriers to upskilling include finding time to learn and lack of leadership support. So that just drives home that this isn't something that employees can solve on their own. And the last theme I'll mention is an increased interest in general fluency. So when you're using AI tools, having a solid technical background and understanding the foundations of the technology you're working with is still important today. Time will tell if that's always going to be needed, but for now, it absolutely is. But oddly enough, working effectively with AI also demands some skill in non technical areas. Take a skill like technical writing and reading comprehension. It's very important when using AI for anything other than smaller projects. For example, when you're using AI agents to plan and write code, you're often spending more time writing clear instructions in markdown files like this that agents rely on to stay on track than you do even reading the code that the agent produces. Now, if that resonates with you and you're thinking, sure, that's obvious. What's so hard about writing? Then you've likely built up some of those skills over time, and you don't realize how much you didn't have that ability to be clear in your writing when you were starting out. Skills like resource management and executive function are more important than ever because when you're working with AI assistants, it's similar to the relationship between a manager and an employee. So you're more likely to have successful interactions and get the results you want if you follow good management practices. And that in itself is a skill that needs to be practiced and developed. So to close out, here's an idea that's repeated a lot in conversations about skills, that the half-life of technology skills is around 2 to 3 years, suggesting that the skills you have are constantly losing value. Now, ironically, I think the first time I heard about a quote like this was about 10 years ago, which means those 10-year-old skills would have halved 4 times for me by now. And instead of focusing on all the skills that I might have lost in that time, I sat down and I thought about what I'm still doing today that I was doing 10 years ago. And unsurprisingly, it's all the foundational stuff. When I'm writing or reading code, I'm still constantly reinforcing one or two programming languages or frameworks that I'm specialized in. Foundational skills in topics like cloud computing. Now, for me, AWS is my go to cloud provider, but yours may be different, and that's fine. Working to secure the applications that I write and using SQL to work with data. And that's in addition to the new skills about operating these AI tools. And in fact, if I map all of these against that list of top technologies and skills from our 2025 survey, it's actually a pretty good match. And I think that investing and continuing to invest in those foundational skills is a good bet in 2026. There's also hints that in a post generative AI world, workers that have adopted a more generalist skill set are better positioned than specialists. And I think there's some truth to that, but it doesn't tell the whole story. I think a better way to frame it is that the same foundational skills that were always useful are now table stakes. It's not enough to say I'm a software developer. I don't need to worry about all the details of cybersecurity or cloud beyond my role in deploying. And on the other hand, it's also not enough to say, well, AI is just doing all of this. I don't even need to worry about it anymore. Another thing to do right now, while there's still a lot of uncertainty about the future, is to keep building things, but not in a way where you're always letting AI tools do everything for you. Now, this doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can have the tools do some parts of the work, and then you can jump in and write code or configure cloud tooling or crunch numbers in a data set. The important part is that you're introducing a little bit of friction now and then, so you don't hand all of your thinking off to AI. And I hope that framing is helpful. Thanks for the time today. Right now, we're going to move on to about 10 minutes of Q&A in the chat. So I don't know if you can see these questions, so I'll repeat them. So the first question is, there's a lot of doom and gloom in tech these days. What's something that you're excited about? So I personally am very excited about being able to remove some of the friction from building things when I have an idea. I'm doing this all the time right now. Right, some of the languages that I use the most are TypeScript and Python, and even just local like community groups that I'm a part of. Things before where we have ideas for little tools to help the community come together and have something that makes us more efficient in our planning. Now I just sort of spin up an AI agent and start building something. And I kind of follow that same advice that I gave a second ago. I usually use the AI to sort of get the boilerplate together. And then I go through and I start, tweaking things with the knowledge that I have. And that's helping me practice the skills that I've got while also helping me practice these new AI skills to, see how they're going to better fit into my workflow in work. I think it's a great thing that we've got this, powerful tool now that helps us be just as efficient and just as productive in our professional stuff, even outside of work. All right, so next question is kind of related. It's what AI tools do you use in your day-to-day work, and how do they help you? So for my work at Pluralsight, I'm creating courses. Like I primarily work on video courses that are on the platform, and I'm still doing a lot of the stuff without AI for that. I have to write all my own scripts and learn technologies and build courses on them, and I don't want to hand all that over to AI. When I am using AI, though, my preferred tools right now are Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex. So Anthropic produces Claude, and they have an amazing terminal interface called Claude Code, and it allows you to sort of point it at a directory or a code base and use that to basically like let the LLM understand everything that's happening inside of that directory and suggest things. You can ask questions about it. You can have it write new code. You can have it refactor code that's already there. So that's a tool that I'm using a lot. I've also been trying out OpenAI's new agentic coding tool called Codex. And that one's wrapped in they have a terminal interface, but it's also wrapped in a graphical user interface. That's kind of interesting to see how that works. So I've been trying that out. That one's pretty new. So those are really the main two AI tools that I'm using right now is Claude and Claude Code rather and Codex. The other thing that I'll mention about that is there's a new not a, sort of new pattern. New is relative in AI, right? Could mean it's only a couple weeks old. Could mean it's a month old. Um, called Skills. I'm really excited about Skills. So Skills is a way that you can sort of document some extra rules that you want AI agents to follow as you're working on a project, and it will sort of like train the AI to think like you're thinking in a way. That's kind of how I think about it. And you're able to sort of drop these custom instructions in the form of this format called agent skills, and then sort of guide your AI agent to think more like you, the human, are thinking as you're working on projects. For me, it's helped a lot because it's helped make my code a lot more readable for me, the human. Right, I can kind of like have the agent respond to me within the boundary of what I actually understand and what I'm able to to work with. So I found a lot of benefits to agent skills. All right, another AI question. What are some tactics you use to stay current on AI tools, especially as things change so quickly? Yeah, this is a really key question. There's a lot of noise about this. There's a lot of people posting about what they're doing. Some of it might be real world stuff. Some of it might be just experiments. So personally, what I do is I have a set of resources that I have bookmarked in my browser. I have the main sort of release blogs from companies like Anthropic and OpenAI, and every day or two, I kind of check on that just to see if they've released anything new. They've both been great about releasing some really detailed information that's very up to date and current about some of the new tools that are coming out or advancements to their models. Outside of that, I work at Pluralsight. I have access to Pluralsight, so I've used several Pluralsight courses. I find that that's a great way to sort of get like a synthesized version of a bunch of different sources because that's what we're doing as authors, right? We're like gathering all this information together and trying to present it in a way that's going to be, the most efficient way to learn from. So Pluralsight courses, I've used some other providers courses as well. Just kind of trying to see what people are doing and follow those trends. If there's local meetups in your area, that's also another great place to get ideas. I'm in Orlando, Florida, and there's a bunch of tech meetups here and tech groups, and some of them are specializing in AI tools. So I'll go to those sometimes and see what other people are doing. And it's a great way to hear about new things, ask questions, and be part of that community. So next question, can you give some examples of how AI is being used in cybersecurity? I'm going to sort of defer on this one a little bit. Cybersecurity isn't my area of expertise. So I don't want to misrepresent some of the state of the art stuff. I do know some things I've read recently. I know that OpenAI has a tool that they say is a sort of an agentic security tool. I believe it's called Aardvark. And Anthropic just announced, like I think in the last week, that they're having sort of a specially tuned version of Claude Code called Claude Code Security. But I actually don't have the deep domain knowledge in cybersecurity to know what's really happening at the cutting edge there. So um, I'm going to sort of leave it at that with that question. All right. So next question. I'm passionate about new technologies. I want to move my career into cloud. I'm from India. I don't want to touch AI technologies. What are the most demanding technologies in your opinion? So I'm not sure if this question means what's the most in-demand technology or what's the most demanding in terms of like what's the hardest to learn. I'm going to answer this one in a more general way, just because I'm not sure exactly what the question's getting at. Um, I'm a big believer in that you need to enjoy the work that you're doing. So especially with something like cloud, tools. There's a couple different providers. I mentioned in my talk a second ago that I've just sort of preferred AWS over the years. I've tried the big three, and I've gone back to AWS personally. And to learn that, other than just taking courses, and I have a couple of the AWS certifications. Other than that kind of work, I just build stuff. Anytime that I have a need for something that might live in the cloud, I use that. I talked a second ago about how I'm building some little internal tools for community groups. I've actually deployed those on Lambda, right, on AWS and Lambdas, because it's just really lightweight. I'm using the serverless application model. So I think it's hard to answer the question directly without knowing all the details of your personal situation and what you already know. But I think that something that's going to be universal for any type of question about what should I learn, how should I move into an area, start building stuff with it. And if you're having fun with it and it's interesting and you feel like you're getting value out of it, then keep up with it. And then just sort of start stacking those skills. Skills stack on each other. You don't just learn one thing and move on to the next thing. Everything builds on the last thing that you learned. So, staying engaged with stuff that is exciting and interesting to you is probably the most important part of learning anything. So, next question: with the popularity of AI, what's the best thing for an entry level individual to do? So yeah, that's a really great question. We're still kind of learning how that's all going to play out. So if you take the employment part out of it, because like I don't know that we can have full control over who's hiring, who's not, exactly what they're hiring for. That's just kind of going to be company or industry dependent. But for just you as somebody who's learning new things, I've said a couple things that I would echo again. Find a topic that's interesting to you, build lots of stuff, find a problem that writing code or building infrastructure is going to solve a problem for someone, so you have like actual humans that you can interact with to understand if that's a solution that's working for them or not, what the pros and cons, or strengths and weaknesses of that solution are. And then along the way, it's totally fine to bring AI into that process. You don't have to completely leave AI off the table to learn. I think it's very important that anybody that's just starting out dives in, to these AI tools. The thing is, you have to kind of take it from from a perspective that you can't give all your agency away to the AI and just let it do everything for you, even if it's able to. And more cases lately, that AI tools are able to produce a lot from just a little bit of human input. But I still think that it's very important for humans to understand what's going on in their code base or in their infrastructure. And There's not really a known good way yet to hand everything over to the AI and just let it, handle all the work for us. So, along the way, you've got to put the time in to learn. There's got to be some of that friction. There's got to be some of that hard work where you're building up skills in the fundamentals, building things with those skills, and then hopefully then being able to apply those in the workforce. So next question, would you say it's still worth trying to learn the foundational language like SQL or Python in this day and age with AI? I actually think that it's very important to do that. I think if you don't know anything yet, I think something that to do that would be valuable would be to pick one thing and go pretty deep on it, right? And that's with AI or without. Either case, it doesn't really change the equation for me. It's so important to be able to have a tool that you can reach for, even if you're not writing the individual lines of code. You're able to sort of understand when you look at it what's actually happening, and you're able to sort of build those skills up and stack them in a way that is going to be useful for your entire career. So last question. What is the difference between OpenAI Codex and Cursor AI, and what are some Codex competitors? Great question. So OpenAI Codex is a tool to use OpenAI's models with an agentic workflow, which basically means that you can prompt Codex and then it can reach out to these things called tools, which are really just pieces of code that perform specific tasks like reading a file, writing a file, searching the web, and it can call multiple of those tools and decide what tools it thinks are right for the job, right? And Cursor, on the other hand, is an IDE, an integrated development environment, and that this is kind of like if you think of like VS Code or JetBrains IDE or Sublime Text or any one of these code editors that exists out there. Um, that is sort of more of a way to package a bunch of useful tools that developers or technologists in general might need to work with in one single interface. That's where the integrated part is from. Cursor is interesting because they actually do bundle an AI agent of their own inside of their Cursor IDE. So I guess you could kind of say Cursor's agent, I believe it's called Composer, and OpenAI's Codex are somewhat competitors in that sense, since they're both agentic tools. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it, but I think that's sort of a general answer. So I think that was the last question. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for all the questions, and look forward to hearing what y'all do with AI tools or not. Have a great day.